we are running.
Nature does not insist on conserving energy in 3 dimensions. We do because we have a 3-dimensional mind. We like to think in terms of space because observation itself destroys time and what we look at is spatial. So we like to think the world is made of space, not space-time. However, nature loves to work in 4 dimensions. Her fundamental law is conservation of energy must apply in 4 dimensions. Now, you're not going to beat that one, so never think about that. But there is no law of nature that requires you to come in and say, also it must apply simultaneously in 3 dimensions. If we build some gadget that makes it apply in 3 dimensions, we apply an extra constraint on what nature will give us. Turning that around, we go around building things that insist on having this 3-dimensional exchange of energy. We got to put it in 3 dimensions for whatever we get out and lose some in the middle. So we got a terrible situation all the way. It's called entropic engineering. We always got entropy beating us to death. Never go over unity, forget it, lose a lot. We talk about, efficiencies at 30% and so forth for our power systems when we talk about burning the coal and all that stuff. But nature doesn't require you to do that. All you have to do is break a little bit of this 3 symmetry set of chains where you have tied her feet to the floor. Once you break the flow in 3 dimensions, you no longer have to conserve energy in 3 dimensions. The basic conservation of energy is an inflow from 4 dimensions, outflow in 3 dimensions. From the 4th dimension, converted and flowed out into 3. And that one is free. Giant negentropy is free. It's just like you punched a hole in the ground and you got a big gusher of oil. You don't have to furnish the pressure and you don't have to furnish the oil. Here it comes. And it comes out in real oil that you can use. For example, Nikola Tesla had one. Basically, his big magnifying transformer that he had on Long Island was such an over-unity system. And so eventually what it does is everything going on is feeding energy into the earth starts to feed energy into that wave that he created. So he gets a lot more energy in his resonant wave fed from outside, from the environment in the interior of the earth. And that's the way he built up a humongous wave of energy. His idea was you could then put in a tap on it anywhere else on the world and extract it free. And of course, J.P. Morgan's take on that was, that's foolish. You can't put a meter on it. So that actually doomed much of Tesla's career at that point when Morgan found out that Tesla, was going to produce the energy freely. Small cost here at a central location, everybody else could tap it for free. Tesla also put a system in a car and ran a car on it. And the reason we're pretty sure is his nephew who rode in the car with him is still alive and can describe the incident and how the engine had no gas, no input of power, and would still run once Tesla got it started. And we know it's perfectly possible. Tesla apparently knew how to use this giant negentropy process that's universal everywhere. Energy is free for the taking from the vacuum, anywhere you want it. Only alternative you have now, of course, since at this moment, as we speak, the government has not moved. The scientific community has not moved. So that is a fact as of this moment I'm speaking. I hope that changes. I'm trying to change it. But right now, that is a fact. And right now it's a fact they're not going to move unless something happens to move them, and neither is the scientific community. But failing that, the only thing left is the private industry. And that's a mixed bag. First of all, the moment you try to do it in the private industry, then is when you are absolutely vulnerable to all the games. For example, lawsuit alone can hang you to where you will never come out of it for the next 15 years. The lawsuit doesn't have to be justified or anything at all. You can sue anybody for anything if you've got enough money to file the suit and want to swear. Simple as that. So the other thing you have is you can trigger anybody from anywhere for all kinds of radicals to come out of there and say, oh, you used a coil of wire, or you used something over here, you used some semiconductor, you stole my invention. And so the next thing you can be in court for 20 years on that. All of this comes at you. This is part of the delay. This is the groups wanting to stay in power while we all go down the tubes. They operate primarily in the private sector. So you're automatically in that arena where the real lions are after you all the time, you're over there trying to find a legitimate deal. Okay, let's talk about venture capital, sometimes called vulture capital. But if you find a good one, it's not vulture, it's venture. What does a venture capitalist want to do? He wants to buy 30% or 50% of your company, or 51, or maybe 60. He's got the money. Then the next thing he wants to do is he's going to move you and all your guys right out of there, and he's going to put his own management team in there, and he's going to run it with bean counters. If you run this one with bean counters only, you destroy the program before you start. So your only choice then is to avoid venture capitalists like the plague and to try to go for licensing, which means the brunt of doing the research on the front end falls on you and your meager resources, which for working people is whatever you can afford out of your back pocket. But if you don't do that, you're not going to do it anyway. How many have you seen in the past that went the venture capital route that were real? How many of them made it? I can name 3 or 4 that were real. They're not there yet. They're not going to be there. They were buried. So the thing that sets in, you have to do it by licensing. Then you got to get the patent office. The patent office says it's impossible to do an over unity system. The API, the Physics Institute, comes down on you and says it's absolutely against the laws of nature. It isn't. These are people who haven't even studied the problem, and they know classical thermodynamics, but it's against the laws of nature and it violates classical thermodynamics. Of course it violates classical thermo. You can't build one of these by classical thermo. You build it by the other kind of thermodynamics. So the next thing you have is the scientific community is all over. Look what they did to cold fusion. There's real stuff in cold fusion. 600 experiments worked, for goodness sake. So the thing is, you're against the scientific community is against you, lock, stock, and barrel. And by the way, everything is a distribution curve. Get off of this horse pucky about scientists are always sweet, nice, reasonable people. That is not true. 10% of them are devils. 10% of them are angels, ought to be rewarded at the salt of the earth. But 10% of them have absolutely no ethics, absolutely playing nothing but the big monkey and power game, and absolutely your worst enemy in this area. Glorious opportunity to, in other words, the vultures, or there's a better word for it, the wolves go around looking for the rabbits, and you're the rabbit and they're the wolf. So your next thing you get into is a big wolf-rabbit game with the scientists over on that 10%. So you face all of that. Meanwhile, you've got to go to the patent office. You get to the patent office, what are you looking at? This is impossible. This is perpetual motion. You say, well, the atoms have been doing this for 15 billion years. It's not perpetual motion, but it's just long-lasting. But they call it perpetual motion, and of course there is an unwritten law that anything that's perpetual motion shall not be even proved or looked at. You can't even get a serious consideration in the patent office. I speak as one who has submitted patents in this area. I know what I'm talking about. I've defended a couple of them. So what we have is a situation where the entire structure of science, industry, the organizations of science, and the patent office are already against you. If you can't get a patent, how can you license? So it's a real neat little thing. It's the old chicken and egg situation. If I had the chickens, I could get some eggs. If I had the eggs, I could get some chickens. This situation is designed so you never get chickens and you never get eggs. So the only thing you can do is to try to put your head down and continue with that and do one other thing, communication. Fortunately, we do have the internet. Sure, it's full of a lot of bad information. It's also full of a lot of good information. You just have to discriminate. So the other thing you have to do to have any chance at all is communicate, 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 which we do to the limit that we're legally able to do and not lose our patents. If we can get the government to move, they can cut through all of that by simply issuing the order to do it. We are running
of time. What are you going to do with the time you have left? I say that if you don't reposition yourself, you could miss the best time in your life, in this season of life. Because we have got to change the way we think. We have got to change the way we function. We have got to change the way we deal with issues. And the reason that you have to begin to reposition the way you think and the way you function and the way you feel is that we many times are stuck between the lines of limited thinking and limited people and limited ideas and limited philosophies, and there's something creative down inside of you saying, let there